My name is Sydney. I am 11 years old, and the day my mom handed me a crumpled $20 bill with a fake bright smile and told me I was independent now before rolling her suitcase out the door and flying to Europe for an entire month was the day I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. And standing there in our empty hallway, watching the taxi pull away, I whispered to myself, I will be fine, even though my hands were shaking and my stomach was already twisting with fear, because deep down I knew this was not independence, this was abandonment, wrapped up in a pretty word. The first problem hit me about 10 minutes after she left, when I found the emergency credit card she had tossed on the kitchen counter like it was some magical solution, except when I tried to order food using every delivery app on my phone, the card got declined over and over and over again, because it turned out the card was never activated, and I did not know the PIN. And standing there alone in my kitchen staring at those words, transaction declined, flashing across my screen, I realized the horrible truth. It was just me, a useless piece of plastic, and $20 to survive an entire month. Day one, I tried to stay positive, slicing bread as thin as humanly possible, spreading peanut butter so carefully it barely covered the surface, telling myself that survivors know how to make things stretch. And I even laughed a little, thinking this would be a great story to tell my friends someday. But by day 3, the laughing stopped when I opened the pantry and saw how little was actually left, just 2 cans I could not figure out how to open without cutting myself, a nearly empty box of stale cereal, and a jar of pickles I absolutely hated, and my stomach growled so loud it echoed through the silent house, and I felt embarrassed, even though there was nobody there to hear it. I tried everything to distract myself from the hunger, turning on the TV and letting random shows play just to fill the crushing silence, opening my mom's laptop and scrolling through her work emails that were stacked up like they mattered more than anything more than me. And that is when something inside me shifted, something cold and clear, and I grabbed my notebook and wrote in big bold letters at the top of a fresh page the single word, evidence. Under that word, I started documenting everything, writing down exactly what happened. Left alone at 11 years old, given $20, no food plan, no babysitter, no check-ins, no phone calls, and I did not know what I would do with this information yet, but writing it all down made me feel less powerless, because if they thought I was old enough to be left alone, then I was definitely old enough to remember every single detail, to record every moment, to make sure that someday someone would finally see the truth about what they had done to me. I picked up my phone with trembling fingers and opened the camera app, pointing it at my own face, and I said quietly into the lens, Day 3, I am still completely alone. The credit card does not work. I ate the last real food yesterday. And if you are watching this, it means someone finally asked what happened to me. And I hit save and locked my phone, and my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, because part of me hoped nobody would ever have to see that video, but another part of me desperately wanted it to explode right in my mom's face the moment she came home. I thought about texting my best friend Emma, but then I would have to admit that my mom had left me, that I was hungry, that I was scared, that I was not okay. So instead I sent her something normal, like, how is your summer going? And she never replied, probably because she was at some lake with her family, eating hot dogs and playing games and living a life where parents actually stayed. And I stared at my phone, waiting for a response that never came, and felt more alone than I ever had in my entire life. By day 5, everything got so much worse, because the hunger was not just in my stomach anymore, it was in my head, like a thick fog, making it impossible to think clearly. And I got dizzy every time I stood up too fast, so I found a half-empty box of cereal hidden way in the back of the cupboard, and I ate it dry straight from the bag, forcing myself to chew slowly to make every single handful last as long as possible. And then I went back to my notebook and added another line, day 5, still no call from mom, not even one text message. And then I wrote something that scared me even as the words appeared on the page. If something happens to me, if I disappear, this notebook will prove it was not my fault. And that was the exact moment my thinking completely changed, because this was not just about surviving until she got back anymore. This was about making sure that when people finally discovered what she had done, there would be consequences, real serious consequences, that she could not talk her way out of or twist around to make it seem like my fault. On day 7, my body felt so weak, like my bones were made of paper, but my anger had grown stronger and sharper than my fear, so I shuffled over to the front window and stared outside at the normal world where kids were riding bikes and dogs were barking at mailmen and couples walked past, holding coffee cups, living their perfectly regular lives with parents who did not just disappear. And I looked at our empty driveway and whispered, "You chose a vacation over your own daughter. Do you even understand what that is going to cost you when someone finally finds out what you did?" And then, exactly like the universe had been listening to my desperate whispered words, the doorbell rang and I completely froze with stale cereal, crumbs still stuck to my fingers, because nobody ever rang our doorbell, not really, and my heart started pounding so violently I could hear it echoing in my ears, and I stood there paralyzed, thinking maybe if I stay completely quiet they will think nobody is home and just leave. But then the doorbell rang again, followed by 3 sharp knocks, and I thought, what if this is it? What if this is the exact moment someone finally sees me? So with my hand shaking badly, I reached for the door handle and cracked it open just enough to see who was standing there, and on my front porch was a man wearing a green jacket with my school's emblem stitched neatly on the chest, and it took me a few confused seconds to recognize him without a classroom around him, but then it clicked. It was Mr. Hughes, the guidance counselor from school, and he said gently, "Hi, Sydney, I have been trying to reach your parents for days, but nobody is answering. Can I please come in for just a moment?" My very first instinct was to lie to protect them, to say everything was perfectly fine, that my parents were just out running errands, that I did not need any help. But then my hand slowly loosened its grip on the door, and I stepped back and whispered, "Sure, I guess you can come in." And he walked inside, and I watched his eyes carefully scan the room, taking in every small detail: the pile of dirty dishes stacked in the sink, the completely empty fruit bowl, the bare counters, and suddenly all of it became evidence I had not meant to stage, but had accidentally left scattered everywhere in plain sight. "Are your parents at work?" he asked carefully, and I answered in a voice that sounded flat and emotionless, "They are in Europe." And when he said for how long, his eyebrows shot straight up in complete shock, and he asked the question that would change everything, "Who is staying here with you?" And I felt my throat tighten as I admitted the truth. "Just me." They said I was old enough to handle it, and something in his face immediately changed, like a switch being violently flipped, and all the polite concern transformed into something much more serious. He pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down, motioning for me to sit across from him, and he said slowly, "Sydney, how long have you been completely alone here?" And I whispered, "Almost a week." "They are gone for a month." And he asked, "Do you have enough food? Do you have money?" And I let out a bitter laugh that did not sound like my voice at all as I said, "They left me a credit card that does not even work, and $20. And he just stared at me for what felt like an eternity, not the way teachers stare when you forget your homework, but something much heavier, like he was mentally counting all the different ways this was horribly wrong. "This is not okay," he finally said, his voice low and serious. "You know that, right?" And even though I wanted to defend my mom, to make excuses for her, I just shrugged, and my chest ached, and I said they told me I was mature enough that I should be able to handle this by myself. And he asked, "And how exactly have you been handling it?" And I desperately wanted to say, fine, to keep pretending everything was okay. But my eyes landed on the notebook sitting on the table with the word evidence written boldly across the top in my own handwriting. "I have been hungry," I admitted, and my voice cracked slightly, "and really scared, and I have been writing everything down just in case something bad happens to me, so that nobody can ever say they did not know what was going on." And the room filled with this heavy silence, but he was not ignoring it. He was really truly feeling it, and he leaned forward and said, "Leaving an 11-year-old child alone for a weeklet, alone an entire month with almost no food and zero supervision is not just irresponsible, Sydney, it is dangerous, it is neglect, and there are actual laws about this kind of thing." My heart started thudding so loudly in my ears I thought I might pass out as those words sank deep into my brain. Neglect, laws, consequences, and I asked in the smallest voice I had ever heard come out of my mouth. What happens if someone finds out about this? And he said very carefully, agencies will get involved, child. Protective services will investigate. There could be serious legal consequences your parents could face, criminal charges, and the way he said it so calmly, so matter of fact, made it feel terrifyingly real. And I repeated slowly, consequences for what they did to me, and he nodded without any hesitation and said yes, exactly for what they did to you. And then he asked the question that would split my life into before and after. Sydney, do you want help? Real help, not just groceries or a hot meal, but the kind of help that makes absolutely sure this never ever happens to you again. And I hesitated because one part of me still wanted to protect my mom, wanted to keep the family secret, wanted to just survive quietly until she came back and pretend none of this ever happened. But there was another part of me, the part that had been carefully documenting everything in that notebook, the part that had recorded videos in the dark, the part that was so exhausted from pretending to be fine, and that part was completely done staying silent. So I looked right at him and said, yes, I want help, but I need to know if I say yes, what does that mean for them? And he answered me honestly, it means they will have to answer for their choices. It means other adults will finally see what you have been going through. It means things will change. I looked down at my small hands and then back up at his kind, worried face, and I said, then please help me. I want them to see exactly what they did. I want them to finally understand what it feels like when you lose all control. And he nodded once very firmly and said, first we make absolutely sure you are safe, and then we make sure the right people hear your whole story. And as he pulled out his phone to make the calls that would permanently change everything, a strange, unexpected calm settled over my entire body. Yes, the fear was still there, humming underneath everything, but below that fear was something completely new, something I had never felt before in my entire life, a quiet, steady determination, because I was not just some helpless kid waiting around to be rescued anymore. I was the witness. I was the one with all the evidence, and my truth was about to become something they could never ignore, never deny, never escape from, no matter how hard they tried. Within an hour, my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, came over with bags of real groceries, and she cried when she saw how thin I had gotten, and she kept saying over and over, oh, sweetie, why did you not come to me? Why did you not ask for help? And I told her the truth, because I thought needing help meant I was weak, meant I was failing, meant I was proving my mom right, that I could not handle being independent. And she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe and whispered, asking for help is the bravest thing you can do. That night I did not sleep in my empty house. I slept at Mrs. Johnson's in a guest room that smelled like clean sheets and lavender, and for the first time in 7 days I was not afraid, and I was not hungry, and I was not alone. And the next morning when I woke up, there were pancakes and orange juice and a social worker sitting at the kitchen table with a folder full of papers and a recording device, and she said, Sydney, I need you to tell me everything that happened, and I want you to know that none of this is your fault. So I told her everything, and she wrote it all down, and she took photos of my notebook and copies of my videos. And when she asked, can I see inside your house, I walked her through every room, showing her the empty fridge, the bare pantry, the unpaid bills stacked on the counter, the credit card that never worked. And she photographed all of it, her face getting more and more serious with every picture she took, and she said, this is more than enough. We have everything we need. 3 weeks later, my mom came home early, her vacation cut short by frantic calls from social services. And when she walked through the front door pulling her suitcase, behind her she was not alone. A police officer and a social worker were standing on our porch waiting, and I watched from Mrs. Johnson's window as my mom's face went from confused to horrified as they explained why they were there. And I heard her voice rising in panic, no, this cannot be happening. This is a misunderstanding. She is fine. I left her money, I left her food. But the evidence did not lie, and the photos did not lie, and my videos did not lie, and the notebook full of my hunger and fear and loneliness did not lie. And as they handed her official documents about investigations and court dates and potential charges, I felt something I never expected. Relief, not happiness, not satisfaction, just relief. Because finally, someone was holding her accountable, and I did not have to keep pretending that what she did was okay. Months later at the hearing, when the judge asked me if I wanted to go back home, I looked at my mom sitting across the courtroom and I said quietly, I want to be somewhere I am safe, somewhere I matter, somewhere I am not invisible. And the judge nodded and ruled that I would stay with Mrs. Johnson until my mom completed parenting classes and therapy and proved she understood what she had done wrong. And my mom cried, but I did not. Because revenge is not always loud and dramatic. Sometimes revenge is just refusing to protect the people who hurt you. Sometimes it is letting the truth speak for itself and watching the consequences finally catch up to them. And as I walked out of that courtroom, holding Mrs. Johnson's hand, I realized I had done something most kids never get the chance to do. I had saved myself. So tell me, if you were 11 years old and left, starving and alone, would you stay silent to protect your family, or would you do exactly what I did and make sure that when they came home, the police were waiting at the door